I'd like to call the meeting to order. Record of attendance, please, and approval of the agenda. Moved by
Judy.
Moved by Judy Wilson Shee, seconded by
Bob Powell.
Bob Powell. Ending on the question. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Conflict of interest disclosure. There being none, we'll move on to the RSC reform discussion. Before we do that, I want to welcome a couple of people. I want to welcome Richard Corey from the Village of Harvey, Heather Holt Logan, who is sitting in for the Village of Stanley tonight. Greg Erickson is back. Nice to see you, Greg. And Brittany Kane is here from the province. So just, if you're looking around and see some unfamiliar faces, that's who they are. Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, we had a meeting and had a great discussion on the two mandates that are set forth by the province, one on tourism, one on economic development. We had presentations, we had a discussion that night. 2 weeks later, we had another meeting and we had a great discussion about all that. And as a result of that meeting, we had a motion, and the motion for both tourism and for economic development, both motions were at that point in time defeated. Subsequent to that, I received a letter from Deputy Minister Ryan Donaghy. He asked me if I could convene a meeting of the board, which I have. You guys have so graciously given up your evening for that tonight. And I would like to now turn the floor over to Ryan, and we'll have a bit of a discussion on economic development and the tourism mandates set out in the government reform process. Ryan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thanks everybody to John's point of giving up this sunny Monday evening. I really appreciate it. And really my request was twofold. Firstly, hoping that we can clarify some of the concerns and issues that may have been raised in your previous meeting. I wasn't there, so I will address a couple of them, and I'm sure there are other questions that will arise. At the end of the day, coming out of this month, actually coming out of the end of June, knowing the delivery mechanism for these new services that the province has mandated was the target date. But as you get closer and closer to budget, it becomes more and more important that who will deliver these mandates on your behalf, be it the RSC, a third party such as a municipality, or a third party such as Ignite, becomes all that much more of a concern for us, because what we don't want to do is to have Mo and the minister impose it on you. So what we were looking for last week and for the last number of weeks was to try to gain consensus around this table on who is going to deliver those services on day one, January 1st, 2023. And clearly from the last meeting, there was no consensus. That said, I did hear from a number of you that the conversation was not necessarily about who was being recommended for the service delivery, but equally or more, it was the fact that you didn't want to deliver the service at all. And unless the province changes course, these services will need to be fulfilled on January 1st, 2023. And so what I am asking is that if there are other alternatives, certainly happy to discuss those. Otherwise, it's about making sure that you have the right checks and balances in place with either who was proposed or anybody else to deliver these services on your behalf. But regional economic development, regional tourism promotion, regional community development are all mandated as of January 1st. And if there is no consensus or no way forward, then the province, through Maurice and the minister, will need to impose that. So I wanted to come and give it a kick at the can to see if there was consensus to be found, if there were alternatives to what was proposed, because at the end of the day, a budget needs to be drafted in the very near future. And it would be very difficult to draft that budget not knowing who would be delivering these services on January 1st. And I will say that you're not the only region that has struggled with this. You're not even the only region that needed a few conversations to get there. So I think this is completely normal. It's new. There are concerns, there are questions. Hopefully we can answer some of those this evening and alleviate some of the concern. Some of you, that concern won't be alleviated if what I heard of the conversation was accurate, that you simply don't want to deliver this. Well, then I don't think that the service deliverer was necessarily the issue. So I'll stop there. I really wanted to make myself available to have a conversation and to try to answer any questions and to hear some of those concerns.
Thank you, Ryan. So I think we'll open the floor to questions or comments for Ryan. So if anyone has any questions or comments, just raise your hand, please. Mayor Wilson Shi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Deputy Minister Ryan. I've got several comments here, and I want to stress that the Village of New Maryland was not opposing to the reform, not opposing to proposals of economic development and tourism. And I'm going to read off to you what Council directed me to say during the motions. Council for the Village of New Maryland believes that before we can agree on a costing formula for the economic development proposal, the Unite Capital Region, and for the tourism proposal that Fredericton Tourism is putting forward to members of the Regional Service Commission 11, we need to know what our residents can expect as return for the cost. That is, we need to see MOUs that specifies what each member of the Regional Service Commission 11 can expect for services under the proposals before we can agree to a cost. As a municipality, we would never enter into cost arrangements like we are being asked to support at the Regional Service Commission 11 without first knowing what our residents can expect for return on their hard-earned tax dollars. Now, I've got a couple questions, and the next one is, what happens with the local LSDs who are supposedly capped in their tax rates? And if they are capped and the cost for services at the Regional Service Commission 11 go forward, does that mean the other communities will have to, within that Regional Service Commission, will picking up the tab?
A great question. So the commitment in the white paper for cost increases for the local restructuring to be phased in, that does not apply to the cost of the RSC. So if there are increased costs at the RSC level, be they these mandated services or solid waste or planning, and they would be absorbed by those LSDs anyway, along with the rest of the municipalities, that's not part of the cap proposal that's being put to government.
Okay. And now I've had a chance to go down through the draft budget, and there's a lot more in there than just tourism and economic development. And what caught my eye was on tourism. We had a sheet that said how much as the Village of New Maryland would be contribute, was supposed to be 37,218. In the draft budget, they have 38,724. It's a difference of 1,504. And then they have the cooperative regional planning, economic development, community development, regional transportation, and has all of our share in there. And it comes out to 92,123. So does that include the tipping fees and the salary for the CEO position? Or is that an additional cost?
I will have to defer to either Brett or Maurice on that one.
I think Brett, can you answer that, please?
Sure. I was just a little slow to take myself off mute. Good question, Judy. And Mary Kay obviously even knows this stuff inside out, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Kay, but it includes the corporate allocation for corporate expenses. and also the share of the CEO position. Is that correct, Mary Kay?
That's correct, yes. And it does not include the tipping fee.
Okay, so in that cost, like for New Maryland, in the draft budget, comes up at 92,123. So that includes the salary for the CEO position,
Yeah, that's correct, Director.
but not the tipping fees.
No, absolutely not. No, it would only be the costs that we budgeted for here. Tipping fees are charged back based on the ton.
Okay, and is there an explanation to why under tourism, our costs went up by a difference of 1,504?
Mary Kay, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question, Judy. So the difference is we were using an estimate when Brett provided you that number probably about a month ago. When we actually did the budget and got the actual cost that had to be allocated out from corporate services, it was slightly higher. So that's why you're seeing the slightly higher 1,500 you're referring to.
Okay, because you see this sheet in front of me, we got our costs for both tourism and economic development. And when my community looked at that, said, okay, that's what we're supposed to be paying. So I think there should have been a revised sheet to tell us exactly what we're paying. Because when we do our budget, we want exact numbers and we don't want any surprises. And I don't know if any other communities are in that position or not, but I was kind of taken back when the total was 92,123. And the last one, I have a concern, and I know other communities likely have the same concern. There's areas that already have like economic development in their communities. Is there not a way that that could be worked around to allow them to continue with that service and not pay the extra, and the extra wouldn't come back on the other communities to such a time when they decide that they will opt out of that private arrangement? Then they come with the Regional Service Commission arrangement, and anyone new going into it wouldn't be able to start out on their own. They'd have to go through the Regional Service Commission, because we're going to be duplicating the services, and there's going to be people that are going to lose their jobs. So there must be a way around that.
So if you look at the responsibilities in one of the PowerPoints that Maurice would have provided, there was the provincial role, the regional role, and the municipal role. There's still a role for municipal economic development or local economic development. And oftentimes that's what many municipalities have in their economic development officer. They're taking care of industrial parks and BIA, not things that are actually being duplicated. If there are duplications to what Ignite is proposing, that's a conversation that the municipality and Ignite could have on a potential partnership going forward.
Okay, so there is the possibility there.
As a partnership between them and Ignite, they'll still have to pay into the regional pot, but they conceivably could, and this is happening in another region where they're partnering with a local, it looks like they probably will, partner with a local economic development agency to actually do part of the territory on the region's behalf.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Director Williamson, please.
Thank you. Good to see you, Ryan. I think misunderstanding, or I may heard some of the things that you said, because did you say that it's the minister, Maurice or the minister, would impose if the board does not agree to what's been proposed?
On January 1st, 2023, the services need to be put in place. And if the board can't reach a consensus, the authority vests in the minister to decide on how that would be put in place. And same with approval of the budget. Ultimately, we'll be looking to all of you, but the ultimate authority on approving that budget comes back.
Okay, now I have no issue because I understand the transitional provisions in the legislation was amended actually to give the minister that authority to adopt the budget. What I'm not clear on, and perhaps you could point me to it, is where the legislative scheme requires that the mandated services, the new mandated services, be offered on January the 1st. And the reason I'm asking that is because, first of all, I haven't seen it personally. In fact, I see in, I think it's 3.1 of the new act, that the new board, come January the 1st, will have an expanded mandate to specifically develop a strategic plan, a regional plan for 3 of the expanded services, including tourism and economic development. And that subsequently, they will then have 6 months to come up with, develop and approve a plan. The act specifically says June 30th. And then the next part of that mandate is going to say, at that point, the obligation on the board is to, or excuse me, the commission is to implement that. So I'm trying to square what you're saying, that services have to be actually offered on January the 1st with that provision. But more generally, I don't see where that is found. It seemed, as I've always understood it, that it's the responsibility of this board as really an interim or provisional board to take steps that are going to put the new board in a position to be able to offer in a timely way, in a reasonable timeframe, those expanded mandated services.
So I'll find the provisions in the act. The services being provided on January 1st are the 5 listed. The regional strategic plan is the other piece that is also being mandated. So they're 2 separate things that will eventually, or should, align.
Well,
and that 6-month period has been given for that regional plan. And we are also going to have regulations that will dictate the cost sharing for the different services. And actually that's going to cabinet in the very near future.
One thing that you just said was should come together. And my concern, and I expressed it at the meeting 2 weeks ago, is that this is a bit of the cart before the horse, because we don't have, and the new board is expected to develop this, a strategic plan. Mm-hmm. And yet we are being asked to agree to what I see as a very specific, detailed proposal, ultimately with agreements for 5 years, costing for 5 years without a plan. And as a director, if I'm responsible, and I underline if, because I am hoping you'll point me to provisions that say that the minister is responsible.
I will. By the time I find it,
agree.
It might be morning, but I will find it.
I know, and that's unfortunate, because right now, if I'm being asked, I'm going to say I can't support the proposals. I think they go well beyond what a provisional or interim board should be doing to set up the new board in order to carry out its mandate come January the 1st. So that goes sort of as a threshold question for me before we'd ever get into discussions of the substance of those proposals. I will say, Ryan, that I do see that there is room for a provisional interim board such as ours, in my opinion, such as ours, to do some things now that would in fact allow that new board on January the 1st to get going, have a head start, sort of set the table. In fact, I would think that let's talk about, for example, finding someone to agree to develop the plan for both tourism and economic development. I think that would be a very good step in advance of the new board taking office, and then being able to do what I think is still going to be a huge challenge, which is to implement the plan and actually offer the services in a proper way. So again, without having seen anything that would say that we have to offer the mandated service January the 1st and that this board isn't responsible, I just have to say that I can't, in exercise of what I see as my duties as a director now, support the proposals.
So I will
Open
find it.
open to some other, perhaps less overreaching proposals that would be consistent with us being a provisional interim board.
So a couple things. We're looking for your guidance. So it is not your responsibility. So we're looking for your guidance. If we try to gain consensus in a lot of regions, we've found it with a couple of, usually a couple of folks who may want something different, but large consensus. And at the end of the day, your points about setting up your future board, you can absolutely do that. Now it'll be up to them whether they take that and run with it. But that's certainly something that's work that can be done. And in fact, what we have done is if there are costs in setting up these services in 2022, they're clearly not budgeted for. We are covering those startup costs, including on community development. The RSC would have received $25,000 as top up for the community developer.
Yeah. Just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that we actually do implement now, just to plan and have the groundwork laid for the new board. I'm surprised at because this is the first time I have heard, and I'm not sure others maybe have heard it before, the word seeking consensus and advice. Again, those are things that I have not seen in the Act, whether it's Bill 82, Bill 110.
The Act
I'm surprised.
The Act gives the authority to the minister, who gives it to Morris. What we're looking for is that advice from the board, so that we're not you all know your region better than I do. Yeah. And therefore that's the exercise we're going through. I will find it, John, you'll get it. Okay.
One point, I think the words that I saw in Bill 82 in reference to Maurice is to assist the board. And that's a very different notion than trying to find consensus so that the minister can impose or decide, impose, I think is the term you used. I'm surprised.
Fair enough. I will find it and I'll make sure the board gets it.
Okay. Thank you, John. And Mayor Morrison, please.
Yes, thank you, guys. It's good seeing everybody here tonight. Our problem wasn't with the mandated services. I mean, that is being mandated by the province, and so be it. Our problem was with the only providers that were checked with, that as far as I know, were Ignite and Fredericton Tourism. Now, the other options have RSC11 doing it in-house, or a hybrid of doing some in-house and doing some outside. But again, Ignite and Fredericton Tourism were the only options that were looked into. Nobody looked into any other providers, or nobody looked into doing it in-house. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. Thank you.
I'll let Muddy speak to what had been looked at and discussed at the transition committee level. You're on mute, Mo.
Yeah, sorry. We, Brett and I, and then at the working group level, we considered notionally the option of Fredericton Tourism. There seemed to be a great deal of support at the working group level for Fredericton Tourism. They are the preeminent RDMO in tourism in New Brunswick. They're in our backyard. So we engaged in a discussion with Dave Seabrook, and then we had several more discussions with Dave, and it just seemed like it was the legitimate and logical option to deliver tourism promotion across the region. Ignite has a track record that is probably unsurpassed, certainly for experience, expertise, longevity. in the area of economic development. They're based in the heart of the capital region. They already had an agreement with Pedal to bring in $1 million a year. So we just felt they were a logical option to consider. We engaged in discussions with Larry Shaw, Brett and I, and at the working group level, and concluded that those were the two best delivery options for these services in the capital region.
But nobody else, nothing else was explored. Nothing like doing it in-house, not looked into, or other providers were not looked at.
Well, I don't know if there's any legitimate other providers in the capital region. If there are, maybe I'm just not aware of them. But in terms of delivering economic development services in the capital region, I don't know that there's any other organization that can do that bringing anywhere near the expertise and experience that Ignite has. In terms of tourism, as I say, I think Tourism Fredericton is the preeminent RDMO in tourism in the entire province. In terms of whether the services could be delivered internally, certainly Brett and I did discuss those options, but obviously it was felt that we didn't really have the expertise in-house to do that. We could have perhaps considered bringing in a significant number of resources with that kind of experience, but given the shortage of labor that the Pedal funding is intended to address, the likelihood of being able to bring people in with the kind of expertise that Ignite has and the kind of expertise that Tourism Fredericton has was probably not very likely. And so we then began to explore the option of the third party option.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Kitchen, please.
Yes, thank you. Welcome to our meeting, Ryan. I guess I felt from our last meeting that the big consensus why it was turned down was not the fact that it was Ignite doing the service, but it was that the outlying communities had no idea on what kind of service they were going to expect and what kind of targets there would be for those outlying communities with regards to economic development. Most of the ones that were written in the proposal could have all been obtained just from within the city of Fredericton, and the effect on the outlying rural community that is RSC11. On the other hand, in Nakwik, we have done a lot of our own and developed that in the last year or so, and you said that they could possibly work together, and we'd love to work with Ignite, but there was nothing written in stone, and there was no plan of action that was shown that was the way that it could be. So, as far as Nakwik was concerned, and I'm speaking of Nakwik, and we're going to be a bigger entity come January 1st, but our regional development corp had already expanded to serve the greater region. And we just don't know what services Ignite will provide, what we're providing ourselves. And that was the biggest reason that we voted it down, because there was no accountability to the outlying area and to Nakwik or in any of the communities.
Well,
So
maybe I'll address that. I can address that one as well if you like, Ryan. Part of the challenge that we're experiencing at the moment is we're working on an MOU related to Ignite doing this kind of work in the Western Valley. And one of the things that has occurred to us is that it is a bit of a challenge on how we're going to measure the deliverables in some of the rural areas. And in fact, we have a call Wednesday morning of this week with Pedal to begin to define how we might be able to measure on deliverables in an MOU, and how we could in fact be able to determine whether in fact we're meeting the objectives that have been laid out at the outset. So the fact that there wasn't that level of detail in the proposal isn't a great surprise. We are working on that in order to be able to incorporate that in an MOU that we would eventually look to sign with Ignite in order to be able to define more precisely what they can do in some of the more rural areas of the province, because they have, or of the region rather, because heretofore they've really been working with 3 or 4 entities that are really fairly big and largely centered around the capital. And so we're actually working on that at the present time. Such KPIs have been developed as part of the PEDAL agreement with Envision in the St. John area, but of course the landscape in an RSC is different from the landscape in another one, and so we're trying to see if we can tie it to what deliverables could be in place for the rural areas in 11 and in 12 as well. So we've got a meeting with on that Wednesday of this week with some senior people in the department, so we're hoping to make some progress and incorporate some of that in an MOU.
And Mayor Kitchen, I do know there's a conversation happening this Thursday between Ignite and
Destination Act.
Destination. I was going to call it Develop. Destination Aquic. So hopefully something can come of that as well.
But I hope you understand why people are, you want to see what you're getting for your money before you go ahead and sign something.
And that is part of this process. So once you pick Ignite or somebody else, then we go to work and get an MOU drafted. Those KPIs can be shared to make sure that there's nothing we've missed, and move on from there. You're not unique. I've heard this comment, but Ignite's not going to spend the time to work with us to draft those KPIs until they have some assurance as well that they're probably going to be the deliverer of the service.
Well, but I mean, a lot of businesses are, if you were bidding on a contract or something, you would be writing out all the things that you were going to provide before you entered that contract.
And
I mean, that's just good business.
and I believe they've presented, if not to the board, the transition committee, what their proposal was. Is that correct, Mo?
Oh yeah, they've made a presentation, but it was admittedly it was a little more general than I think Ian and others were looking for. Okay. But frankly, no more general than the other proposals that we've received on other matters other than economic development. In some instances, it's very difficult to be a great deal more specific than they've been. But as I say, we're working on that now, and the intent was to incorporate that level of accountability and that level of detail into the MOU. And of course, the MOU would come to the board, and the board would have an opportunity to review it. And in fact, I had even suggested that what I'd like to do is form a small group of representatives of various municipalities that have had experience with Ignite, and to benefit from that experience and see how we could build and make an even stronger MOU and put that in place on behalf of all the entities in the region. So we'd want to look at that for the MOU.
So just one more comment. I mean, I know we picked Ignite. I mean, if it's a 5-year contract, or is there a time where the new board might say, wait, now this isn't working and we need to go back to the drawing board, or do we have to stay locked in for 5 years?
There would be an out clause. There would be an out clause in the MOU.
Yeah, usually any out clause that I've seen in such a contract is a certain period of time, usually a year, notice that you're going to go in another direction.
That's correct.
Well, I'll be interested to see how the meeting goes on Thursday, because I mean, I know we're all doing our own. We're pretty accountable. We know what's happened and what hasn't happened as far as economic development, tourism have happened locally. So
yeah, the meeting is Friday, but yeah, that's maybe one Thursday. I know of one on Friday, but anyway, yeah. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Nobody has their hand up. Mayor Powell?
Yes. Thanks, John. We've worked with Ignite before, and we did it for 10 years, and we never received anything, right? And so and the town of Warmock agrees with going with the City of Fredericton tourism and economic development from Ignite. But we don't agree with the price tag that they're throwing at us right now, and we don't agree with the 5-year term. Jumping into an agreement for 5 years, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you don't know what the agreement is. And I'd like to know how they come up with the figures we'd have to pay. Like I said, we paid $30,000 a year for 10 years and never got anything. And now you want us to pay $146,000 for Ignite with no guarantee what we're going to get. And I don't know where you picked the 5 years, Ryan. I don't know where that come from.
Well, the agreement, the draft, very draft MOU that I've been working on has a clause in it that would make it for 5 years. And the reason for that is simply that if they're going to hire people and staff up to provide a service, they're going to take the first 6 months of the year and develop the strategy going forward, consult with all of the entities, get the feedback and the input that's required in order to develop a good 3 to 5 year strategy going forward with an execution plan and deliverables, etc. We just can't expect to engage in an organization for a year and expect them to, at the end of it, that we'll cut the contract. However, even though we would go with a 5 year contract, as we've said, there is an out clause, and after a certain period of time, you give notice. After a certain period of time, that notice is over and the contract can expire, and both parties walk away if you decide at the board level that you want to pursue another option. So you're not locked in concrete, but you are locked into an agreement in order to give the supplier the opportunity to build up the capacity to deliver on the contract. But there is an opportunity to exit from that contract within a certain time frame if it's decided by the new board at some point down the road.
Ryan, could you clarify some? I'm getting different signals from the tourism, hotel tourism fees.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
The hotel levy.
The hotel levies. I'm getting mixed messages, and I just want to clear it up. Now, the town of Oromocto hasn't approached the days in for the hotel levies, but we're in discussions here next week with them.
Yep.
Now that levy, where does that go? Does it come to the town?
Yep.
So it comes to the town, so we can use that levy to put into our tourism funds?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. You can either pay the tourism piece of the RSC, or you can use it on tourism development in your own municipality. At the end of the day, that would be a decision of your council.
Perfect. That clears it all up. Thank you.
Thanks.
And just to your former question about how we arrived at the figure by simply saying, look, let's look at a penny on the tax rate. Let's look at a penny, and what would that give us? So internally, Brett and I talked about that. So it would be about 1.4. And we thought if we complemented that with the pedal funding, that's another $1,900,000, I think, in the first year, something like that. But then it builds up to $1 million. That gives a pretty hefty pot of money in order to deliver economic development effectively across the region. We looked around and talked to others, Envision and others, just to see how we compared. And in fact, we're about 40% lower than Envision is in terms of the work that they're looking to do in the St. John area. So it's not like I don't think it's like we're spending a ton of money compared to an organization that's doing similar work in a similar region, such as Fundy. But so we arrived at that 1.4 and figured, okay, that's a little under a penny on the tax rate. That seems reasonable to us. That's how we arrived at the figure, Bob. Okay.
And the executive director position.
Yes.
Okay, so there is going to be an executive director and a CEO.
Well, there's going to be a new CEO, that's for sure. The new CEO should be in place in early September, and the funding for that CEO position is covered by the province until January of 2023. Once the new CEO is in place, that person can look at the structure of the RSC, the responsibilities that it has, and at that point, presumably can make a determination or at least a recommendation to the board as to what should happen to that position, the executive director position, on a go-forward basis. I mean, I don't want to prejudge what a CEO might do, but that's basically the situation. I suspect in some RSCs, they'll keep the executive director, and I suspect in others, they may not. It just depends on a variety of circumstances that are going to be likely quite unique to each RSC.
Thank you, Maurice, and thank you, Bob. Excuse me, Mayor Barnett, please. Erica.
Thank you. So I'm likely going to echo a few comments that were made by others, but my council's main concerns stem from the cost and really the lack of knowledge what we're receiving for services. We're undergoing obviously a really large restructuring, and we have no, at this time, knowledge about what our new budget will look like for the new municipality and what that would mean exactly to our residents. Again, we have issues with signing a contract without knowing what the deliverables are. So that is my council's main concerns with what's being proposed.
Thank you.
Fair comments.
Fair. Thank you very much, Erica. Mayor Pleadwell, please.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I was dialed in and I had to try to get on the Zoom another way to raise my hand. Thanks for going through everything tonight. And I just wanted to address a comment. I've heard outlining communities being addressed, and I consider the village of Gagetown an outlying community. And again, I want to express my support for both these entities to deliver this service. We're a small community. We're one of 6 founding communities of Arcadia, and speaking solely for the village of Gagetown, I want to give this a little bit of context in terms of our contribution to this economic development and to the tourism side. It basically mirrors what we spend on streetlights in the village of Gagetown, either of those. And that puts us in the game and hopefully help us become less of an outlying community and in the game of economic development and tourism with the support of agencies and personnel that have experience in this area, and acknowledging that MOUs and KPIs are to come, and hoping to be part of that inclusion, part of that group that helps look at those MOUs and KPIs to make sure that they're suitable for a community of our size and a region other than just where things are being delivered now. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Director Chamberlain, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clear up something. The MOU will mention the out clause, I take it. That was one thing. And the out clause, I was wondering if RSC11 board would decide to terminate that contract, would they end up paying a penalty to Ignite or Fredericton Tourism?
I don't want to prejudge what the final MOU would say, so it's a little difficult to be definitive on that at this point. And obviously, we'll want to bring that MOU forward and have some discussions with various CAOs who has some history with Ignite, and maybe able to make a good contribution to the finalization of that before we take it to the board. But in its present form, there would not be a penalty if you respect the timeline within which you're supposed to give to the supplier before the contract is terminated.
Usually, the agreements that I've seen from other regions have some of them specify either an amount of time or the financial contribution, or the amount of time plus anything that would have been taken on by the organization that was intended to be a multi-year purchase. Those clauses are pretty standard to contracts, but Maris answered for what's in the current draft anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mayor Wilson Shee, please.
Thank you. I just want to ask Maurice a question which he has been answering quite often in a lot of our meetings. With all the new services, the mandated services, and not just tourism and economic development, are you still saying that it's only going to be 2.5% increase?
Well, that was the last 2.5 was roughly the number that I'd been given when Brett and I spoke. And I'll defer now to Brett because I know he and the team have been working on the budget, and so they may be in a better position to make a comment on that. Brett?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Maurice. Currently, Judy, and sorry if I'm stumbling. I'm just reading off the sheet as we go. The only additional costs, when we talked about the costs, and I was thinking back on your previous comment, you know, there was no intention to be misleading, of course, when we gave those numbers, but there's additional costs that have to be allocated towards their share of the corporate expense. These are all looked at as separate divisions under the provincial form of the budget. Your current increase for New Maryland would stand at 0.0, well, actually 2.27 cents on the mill rate.
0.227.
Yeah, $0.0227, right? So
Yes.
2.27 cents on the mill rate for all of the services, including the corporate allocation.
And that
now,
doesn't include the tiffin fees, right?
oh no, of course not. No, let me just see here. It does include cooperative and regional planning, tourism
Yes, it
promotion. Yep, economic development, community development, regional transportation.
Transportation, public safety, sports, recreation, and culture infrastructure, which we haven't discussed. And I thought that was supposed to be in place by January the 1st, the formula. Anyhow, we have allotted 20,000 for that, and
Correct.
the Maryland share is 173. Now, I want to make sure, because I know we've been saying all along 3 cents, now 2.5, and you know, for all the services, but we really haven't had detailed discussions about the other identities there. They're just seeing the figures. So I'll leave it at that, but I have one comment, and with tourism, estimated budget, you have 600,000. So when you total everything up, you come to 620,000, 20,000 over. And if you go for 5 years, that's $100,000 that we could have shaved off there somewhere. And also with the CEO's job, if we could have talked about it beforehand, because it's already in the budget for 2023 right now for the ED's position. There are other factors that we should really be seriously looking at. And please don't just keep saying it's only a cent, it's a cent. Well, after a while, those pennies add up. And to some communities, they're going to be hit hard trying to let their residents know this is what's going on and the value that we are getting for our money, because we're responsible to our residents. Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Judy. Anybody else have any comments? Well, I think I have a comment or two to make. As chair, I'm not sure if I can, but I do represent the second smallest community in the province, effective January 1st. I think it seems, I've been taking notes, I got 6 or 7 pages here from what everybody said, and it seems like most people are kind of on side. The issue is what it's going to cost, and I think the issue seems to be around, and I think it seems to be that we feel that maybe that we weren't included in the process. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I think at the end of the day, Maurice has made the suggestion, this is the 3rd meeting he's made the suggestion to develop some kind of a committee of people who's had some of the experiences with Ignite. And I don't think anybody other than the cities had experience with tourism Fredericton, but he's made that option. And I'm a negotiator by trade, I guess. And it seems that we could have a meeting every month or every week or every second day, and we could have these same discussions that we're having over and over and over, and we don't seem to be getting anywhere. I'm of the opinion that I would sooner drive my own ship as opposed to effective January 1st, the province saying, okay, we're going to mandate these two economic development and tourism. We're going to mandate that. And well, you guys thought it was 2.5 or 3 or 1 or 1.4, whatever the number was. And all of a sudden we're going to say it's 5. And we're going to do it. We're a commission of people who represent the people of our region right now. And I think we should take Maurice's offer and let him assemble a committee of people who do have those services, or who want to have something to say and get in and let's get a committee together that will develop something, as opposed to just keep talking and talking and talking. We're at the end of August, and we have a budget to put together effective for January that's going to affect all the taxpayers. And Judy talks about 1 cent, and I don't disagree with her, but we're not getting anywhere. I think we've heard these same arguments 3 times. So why don't we take that advice, get a committee, as Marisa suggested, of some of the directors, and talk about it and come to some kind of consensus. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm out of line for saying it, but this is the 3rd time we've talked about this, and I don't see in my notes anything much more different than I saw on the first night we had the meetings. That's my comments. Director Morrison.
Thank you. I'm coming in a bit late here, but I've been listening. I've heard a lot of this, a penny, 1 cent on the mill rate, 2.5 cents on the mill rate, but every cent is $10 on $100,000 of assessment. And it's easy to say that's not a lot of money, but there are folks out there that maybe will find that to be a lot of extra money. But my real concern is I live in rural New Brunswick, and I really am struggling with trying to understand where we can generate any tourism or economic development plans in this area that's going to benefit me. And in talking to the neighbors, they have the same thought. So maybe someone could maybe educate me a bit. So how does it help someone sitting in the rural community of Harvey, just about as far away as you can get from Harvey, and still be in the community?
I'll jump in because I truly believe that both of these services are really good opportunities for a regional service. Your folks need to work somewhere. We do need to bring jobs to the area. And as far as tourism goes, there's probably quite a bit of untapped potential in your new rural community for expanded tourism growth. If I'm pretty sure the King's Landing is in your LSD. So if you can get more visitors, there may be more services, there may be more people that need to work there. So this is about taking a regional view, especially in tourism promotion, and saying, what does somebody do in the region for a week, for 10 days, for 2 weeks? And, are they going to come to your area for those full 2 weeks? Maybe not, but they're going to come to the region, and you promote some of those tourism products. And I think there are some great tourism products in your backyard.
Thank you. And I will mention one that I never hear mentioned. It's called ecotourism. And I thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Peter. Anybody else have any comments or concerns or questions?
John.
Oh, sorry, Peter or Richard.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to sit in and listen to your conversation. One of the things that I've been thinking through here is that what are the alternatives? I mean, either you figure out something to give to the new RSC board to work with in January, or you don't, and you let the government figure that out. So as you said a few minutes ago, John, I think they need to move forward, because just to hand a budget and a problem to the new RSC board isn't, it's going to take them 2 years instead of 8 or 9 months to get up and running. That's the primary thought that I had in both tourism and economic development. As far as the costs go in our new rural community, no matter, we could debate whether 33,000 makes sense or doesn't make sense, but I can tell you this, we could do nothing towards economic development with $33,000. So that's.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else have any comments?
I think Mr. Sharp does.
Oh, sorry, Stephen. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Chair, just a couple of items. I'd like to. I agree with your comments, John. I mean, I think we've beaten this around enough. I would agree with Derek in Gagetown. We're in an outlying area here, and we're surrounded by lakes and rivers, and there's certainly all kinds of opportunity for economic development. And that's going to cost money. And I think at the end of the day, the directors need to take a look at the motions that were actually made. And from what I read, unless we agree an acceptable service agreement, we don't have an agreement. So I think we need to start working on this and let them bring something back, and we can either agree with it or not. But let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we're, Greg Erickson, City, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I was having trouble getting through all the icons on my screen to unmute myself. I just wanted to share one observation, and as I listen to all these concerns and questions, these are excellent points, and I certainly look forward to people reaching a level of comfort with all of this. I've been working with Ignite, doing local economic development in our tourism piece since I first became a councillor about 10 years ago. And to be honest, none of the deliverables meet my expectations for something that are really strong and really robust. And I think I need to set that from my own perspective. It's a whole lot easier for us to figure out deliverables when it comes to our transit system and our water and sewer system and things that are easy to quantify. But when you're making investments in hypothetical futures, it gets very problematic. And perhaps if we do strike a committee to drill down and get some better answers to these concerns, which I think is an excellent idea, part of that has to be a conversation about what are the possible KPIs in these areas, because they're not the same familiar infrastructure related or known service related things that the RSC has been dealing with in many ways for years. So this is a new area of expertise is required. What I've been struggling with here at the City of Fredericton for years is some of that variability based on what these two different areas of development can't get away from, which is how can they promise deliverables on attracting businesses to the region when COVID turns out to be just around the corner, or if something else changes. So we've had to adopt a very fluid governance mindset. It's been challenging for a lot of new councillors over the years, and even for myself, over the years, because it just doesn't provide the kind of confidence that I would like to have in my conversations with the constituents I represent. But I do know that we can't do any better for the KPIs we're using than the ones that are out there. There's no one doing a better job figuring out how to measure, concrete deliverables in these two policy areas and produce a better way to do budgeting that can provide a higher degree of confidence. Anyway, Mr. Chair, those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, so here we are. Where do we go? This is my opinion. We're getting into the budget cycle. We need to get where we're going to get, because as Judy and others have said, at the end of the day, we need to know, going into our own municipal budget cycles, what the cost is going to be to our communities. If we continue this, and again, it's my opinion, if we continue to talk about this for the next couple months, how is that going to be any advantage to our communities? Because we're still not going to know what the number is. I think my opinion would be is if we allow Maurice to develop this committee, and that committee sit and develop whatever it is, an MOU, or I don't know how you develop an MOU at this point in time, unless you know who you're going to be dealing with. But if we feel we're going to develop an MOU, then let's develop an MOU based with committee members from the RSC, the current members, and come back to the board with something in, you know, in short order, so that we can move on and get this decided. Because, you know, what are you going to put into your budget for your community for 2023 if we soon don't get this sorted out, whether it's regardless of the cost? The procedural side of it that you know, John has talked about, and I don't disagree with a lot of what he said. That has to happen, and we have to make sure all that stuff works. But we also have to provide, as a municipality, to the minister a budget by, I'm going to say November 1st, but I think the date's changed. We have to, that's our mandate as municipalities, to provide that to the minister. So if we keep talking about this, we can't do it, or we're going to just put a number in. So why don't we just sit down, get a committee together, determine what the real cost is, determine what the MOU is, and at least have a number for 2023. I think that's the next step. I may be way off base, but you know, we soon have to do it. We're in the middle of August. John, please. John Williamson.
Yeah, thank you, John. The budget issue, I am not, I guess, 100% aware of how the provincial budgeting system works for local governments, but in my experience in other contexts, a reasonable projection of the costs can be put in a budget, and it would be available. If you're over or under, it gets worked out in time. So I'm not personally convinced that there's the kind of pressure that I've heard from Ryan and perhaps from you. The number can be projected based on reasonable assumptions, and if it's high, it gets worked out. If it's low, it gets worked out. I'm not sure the time frame in the provincial system, but I think it's probably 2 years cycle. So I again personally don't feel the pressure that I'm hearing from again Ryan and from you. I may be missing something, but reasonable projections, I think, and including based on what we've already seen from the two proponents, Ignite and the City of Reading, a good basis for budgeting.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, John. I agree that reasonable projections are in order, but we've heard from several mayors who said they want to know what the exact cost is to put in their budget. We've heard that tonight. We've heard it last week. We heard it before that. So there's mayors that are concerned about that. And I agree that a reasonable projection of the cost is all I need in Fredericton Junction, but there's other mayors that suggested that they need exact numbers. And that's the point that I was trying to make. I think that we need to move on. I think what we need to do is get this committee together, and it sounds like a reasonable response to get to the point where some members of the board could be part of that committee that's you know, that has some experience with economic development, with Ignite, and have 5 or 6 members and sit down with Maurice and Brett, come up with a reasonable response, bring it back to the board and see where it lands. Otherwise, we can just talk about this forever. I mean,
well, the other thing, Mr. Chair, that I should add is that we do have a meeting planned for later this week with the Finance Committee of the board to review a draft of the budget. And at the present time, we've got a meeting planned for September 8th, a board meeting of the Capital Region Board to review the budget, at which point it will then be sent to CAOs and clerks across the region, give them a couple of weeks to review it, provide some feedback, and then they're back in and completed by end of September. And early in October, they're sent along to the minister for his review and final approval. So there isn't a whole lot of flex time in terms of the budget and in terms of the dollar values that we're apportioning to these services. And as you say, if folks are comfortable with proceeding with these two service providers, I'm engaged to put together a committee, particularly of representatives of the organizations that have had Ignite as a client and benefit from the experience that they've witnessed and gone through to help ensure that we can bring an MOU to the board that's as good as it possibly can be.
We'll just add, and just from experience, if any of your CAOs are used to dealing with contracts, they may also be helpful if you are open to bring in their expertise, not just board members, but I leave that completely to the group.
Well, no, and that's a good suggestion. In fact, what I'd spoken to a couple of CAOs about was in fact, getting together initially with them at a bit of a working level, and then bringing it up to maybe an advisory committee, if you will, of the board prior to bringing it to the full board. It's not that I'm wanting to complicate things, but as Ryan says, there may be people that work on the staff at the staff level that have some experience and maybe in some cases considerable experience with contracts and MOUs and service level agreements and the such and similar agreements. So if we could do it that way, that would be helpful as well. But I'm really open to trying to work to make it as good as we can.
Thank you. Judy, you have a comment?
Yes. Is there a reason why our next meeting, like for the budget, the draft will be September the 8th? That's on a Thursday. Are we not going to go back to the first Tuesday of the month that we're normally used to having?
Yeah, I think the first Tuesday of the month is the day after, I think it's the day after Labor Day, is it not?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chair, Judy, the reason that we did that, typically that's exactly what we do. If the Tuesday falls directly after Labor Day, we move it to the following Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay, because I noticed a lot lately, like there's different dates here and there, and it's kind of a struggle. It's a challenge to make sure I'm available for all those meetings. And I know other members around the table, because like some had council tonight, and I think, Mr. Chair, you had a council, you were getting your deputy, and I know City of Fredericton, they had a council meeting. And just one last comment in closing, and this is due respect. At our last meeting, when we voted and on tourism and economic development, and they were both defeated, I raised my hand and I specifically asked, what is the next step? And Maurice, you said that Brett, you were on vacation, you wait till you get back on Monday, you discuss it. So I was looking for a direction from staff to set another step in front of us and tell us what direction we should be going. Thank you.
Subsequent to that, though, Judy, I got the request from Ryan to call a meeting, and so that's a board meeting, not a staff meeting. So that's why we're meeting tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So where do we land? Do we take Maurice's suggestion to get a committee together of people who have some experience with Ignite, sorry, and bring that together to see if we can come up with an MOU at the board and bring back to the board for the board to I guess ratify. I don't know if that's the right word, but anyway, does that sound like the right course of action? And if it is, can somebody move that, please? Okay, if that's not the right course of action, who has the right course of action or suggestion?
So I'm going to request of Mo that he forms a committee. He'll either sit there alone or some folks will join him. Because I don't want Maurice or my staff doing this alone. This is about the region. We want the right MOU, the right KPIs. So I'm going to ask him to do that, and then the group can choose to participate or not.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Okay, Ian, please.
Just a comment. I mean, I'm all in favor of this committee, but why is it just people that have had experience with Ignite?
It doesn't have to be, in my opinion.
Well,
It's a
that was just the comment that was made, and I mean, especially us that are in the rural areas that don't have any real, should have some say in there too, because
I don't disagree. I think
different
I would leave,
perspective.
I'd leave it up to Mo to decide who he feels should be on the committee.
Yeah, let me explain why that is. And again, I'm quite open to the idea, Ian. So thanks for putting it forth. But I just want to clarify for everyone why it was proposed in that context. There were some who have had some experience with Ignite who were of the view that they had not been perhaps as diligent enough in ensuring that Ignite was as accountable as it might be. They took upon themselves the responsibility for that. It wasn't assigned to myself or to Brett or to Ignite. It was, in fact, the agreements that they had in place were not perhaps strong enough to hold Ignite accountable as much as they felt they should be. And I said, well, look, that would be great to have you involved to ensure that the next time, if we go ahead with Ignite, that we put in place an agreement that's going to ensure the level of accountability that'll keep us all happy. So it wasn't done. It wasn't suggested in the context of excluding anyone. It was suggested in the context of including those who had that firsthand experience. But I take your suggestion, and I'll talk to Brett tomorrow, and we'll try and see if we can put together a committee that's representative of the area. At the same time, as we're hopeful it can be a functioning one that can actually move things forward. We're not quite ready to bring a draft in front of this group just yet. We're having a meeting, as I said, on Wednesday with Petal. So it'll be a little while until we can get that process moving along. But I assure you that I'm committed to doing it. And I want to get as much input as we can to ensure that we get as good a quality document as possible.
Thank you, Mo. Any other, excuse me, any other comments? That being said, so Maurice is going to establish a committee to discuss an MOU and bring one together to bring back to the board. And I guess that's the next steps. So if there's no other comments, concerns, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
Move, Judy.
Second it, Bob Powell.
Moved by Judy, second by Bob. Meeting is adjourned at 7:43. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for taking your time tonight. It was
Thanks,
a
everyone.
pleasure.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Maurice,
Yes.
Maurice, can
Yes.
you call me at my house number? About this MOU.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm sure I will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Bob.
Thank.
Yeah.